Hello and welcome to this recorded session of our webinar, Get Them Ready Faster, How to Personalize Leadership Development. My name is Martin Lanek. I am the CEO of Pinsight and I hold a doctoral degree in industrial organizational psychology. In this short version of our webinar, we'll discuss three things. First, we'll talk about how to use assessments to personalize leadership development. Second, we'll talk about the apps that you can make available for every leader in your company. And then third, we'll talk about the measurement piece. How do you ensure and how do you measure ROI of the development process? When you look at the recent trends in leadership development, there are 6 big themes that seem to emerge. The first one is that there is a push to personalize leadership development to the unique needs of individuals, and every leader in your organization is really unique. So the leadership development program should be customized to their strengths and their development needs. But this has traditionally been very difficult because we, when you look at leadership development, have relied on classroom-based instruction or maybe some e-learning. And that sort of one-size-fits-all approach is no longer enough. There's also movement towards having just-in-time information. So not presenting information and learning information that you will use 6 months from now or maybe a year from now, but very much providing leaders the information they need just as they are working on projects or as they are aligning to different business strategies. The development also has to be in the flow of work. And what this means is that the development is not something that you do outside of work. It's not extra. It actually becomes part of the work. And example that I'll share with you later is the Leader Habit app, which gives leaders a different type of exercise and different type of behavior to try that replaces a current behavior. So for example, they might be going about delegating in a certain way, but the Leader Habit app gives them an alternative behavior that they can try. Another big trend is microlearning. So rather than having a big leadership development programs with a lot of content, now the focus is much more of small bites, chunks that can be digested on a daily basis. The leadership development programs are now going mobile. So we see a lot of different applications on the market that maybe provide some basic instruction or help leaders to adopt new habits. And most importantly, there is a realization now that leadership development needs to be a continuous process. People don't change their behavior and develop just from reading books or attending classes. There has to be a follow-up. And I'll give you an example later on of what we have done in this regard at Pinsight. So let's start with the first topic. How do you use assessments to personalize leadership development to the unique needs of every leader in your organization? There are different types of assessments available on the market, and these differ based on their accuracy and then based on their cost. The flagship assessment available to organizations for a long time has been an in-person assessment center. So this is when you would send mainly your senior executives to an actual assessment facility. They would maybe engage in several role plays with industrial psychologists. They would take some psychometric tests, and then the psychologists would observe their behavior in these various simulations, and based on that, write up a report. This is perhaps the most accurate assessment that we have available on the market because you are watching actual behavior. You're not relying on self-reports and what the person thinks, how they act. But the problem has always been cost. These sort of senior assessments can run anywhere between $10,000 to $40,000 per person. On the other lower ends of the spectrum are just basic $10, $20 personality situational judgment tests. And these are very low in cost, so we see that a lot of organizations use them, but they're also low in their accuracy. These are self-report tests, and what that means is that they are as good as the person has insight about their own behavior and their own tendencies, because the candidate or the participant is filling out this information. There are also 300-degree feedback tools that you have probably used in your leadership development programs, but they also are quite low in their accuracy because you are not watching people in a standardized environment, and it's very difficult to observe their behavior at work and actually remember that behavior. So managers often struggle with this, but there not only the accuracy is low, but there's also very high costs, especially hidden costs. So when you think about the time that managers have to spend filling out these feedback tools, it adds up very quickly. And what we see more recently are virtual assessment centers. So virtual assessment centers are online versions of these flagship in-person assessment centers. So they still provide a simulation, but they are now significantly less expensive, but still maintain that high level of accuracy. Whatever assessments you use, the key is that you are assessing the entire person, because that is how you can devise a development plan with the highest impact. So when you are putting an assessment together, these are the three basic questions that the assessment should answer. What are the current skills of the person? What skills come to them naturally with their personality or tendencies? And how quickly do they learn? Based on this, you can devise a targeted development plan for every person in your organization. Let me give you an example of a virtual assessment center, because not many people are familiar with virtual assessment centers, and this is still something new. So in a virtual assessment center, the key difference is that you are not just filling out a test. It's not A, B, C, D. You are actually doing the job in a simulation. And from a development perspective, this is very, very helpful for leaders, because they can try out new behaviors, they can experience situations that they have not really experienced before, and practice them in a safe environment, very similar to what pilots would do in a flight simulator. So imagine that you are a new manager, director, or executive in this fictitious company, and then for 3 hours you will be immersed in this simulation. You would have meetings with live people, so there would be on webcam live people that are role-playing with you and are playing maybe angry customers or underperforming employees that you have to coach. And this is what it would look like. So when a time comes for a role play, then a role player would call you, and then you would engage in this type of interaction. Key benefit of an assessment center, whether in person or virtual, is that you are able to see the actual behavior. You are able to get a precise measurement of competencies that you cannot get any other way. No self-report measures will ever get you that level of accuracy when it comes to competencies and the person's strengths and individual and development needs. And this is very important, because if you have a clear understanding of the baseline, then you can start devising a targeted development plan for that particular person. And that's where the assessment really comes in handy, because now you can understand what are the development gaps. You can compare those with the person's personality profile and see if those competencies come to them naturally, so that people are working on areas where they are most likely to see success and growth very quickly. So the next question then obviously is, how do you scale this? So how do you provide tailored development for every person in your organization? Many companies use apps for this purpose. So they are starting to implement apps as part of the leadership development programs. And we think of it really as the third leg of the stool. So you still will have your traditional leadership development type of interventions like classes, workshops, maybe some action learning. And then the apps provide your daily practice. So they make the learning, they reinforce the learning, and they bring it to life for the individual. So when you think of the apps that are on the market, majority of them rely on instructional design. So you would have some maybe short videos of the content, maybe a reading list, maybe a short podcast or article or some quizzes that are going to keep that material fresh. But majority of these apps, as you can see from this slide right here, really focus on acquisition of knowledge. And we know that knowledge is not really, it's just part of the equation, because knowledge does not equal skill. I often use the example of piano playing. When I started college, I was majoring in piano performance, and I could be watching YouTube videos all day long, but unless I start playing the piano, unless I start practicing, I wouldn't actually learn how to play the piano. And it's exactly the same way with leadership. Unless we practice leadership skills, we're not going to see behavioral change. What we'll see is maybe increase in knowledge, but not change in behavior. But even with knowledge, so when the apps focus on acquisition of knowledge, it gets very tricky because we forget new information very quickly. This is the famous forgetting curve from cognitive psychology. And you can see the astonishing rate at which we forget new information. Just 1 hour later, after you hear new information, you only remember 65% of it. The next day, only half, and then a week later, only 15%. So, of course, if you cannot remember the concepts that you learn, then it's going to be very difficult for you to actually apply them. And that is why the daily practice is so important. Let me give you an example of an app that we have been working on at Pinsight. So rather than focusing on acquisition of knowledge, we decided to focus on habits. And we thought, how do people really form habits? There's a very basic formula. If you read The Power of Habit, you'll know it. So habit is really just a combination between a cue and a micro behavior. And the smaller you make the behavior, the quicker it's actually going to become a habit. And you practice that cue behavior association many times, on average 66 days, and then it just becomes automated, becomes natural. And whenever the cue presents itself, you do the micro behavior. So what will that actually look like from an app perspective? Let's say that your development gap is empowering others. So here is an example of an exercise that you would be practicing. After someone comes to you with a problem or issue, it's the cue, ask questions instead of offering solutions and advice by saying, what makes this a problem? What have you already tried? And that's the behavior. And you practice this simple exercise for 12 days in this case, and as you are practicing, the app is actually tracking your progress. So now let's talk about the measurement. I told you that the app is tracking your progress. It's using artificial intelligence to actually measure your improvement. So let's talk through an example for how you can actually translate this into an ROI metric. Let's say that we put several people through the assessment, and you can see their original score when they took the virtual assessment center. And now that they have been practicing using the Leader Habit app, you can see that they have improved. And that would be the third column, or actually the middle column here that says improvement. So Hans, for instance, improved by 3.85%. And these analytics would be updated on a daily basis for you. Once we can calculate this improvement, then we can put it into the basic ROI calculation. For example, we can use the annual salary of a manager as a proxy of his or her value to the organization. So if you are paying a manager $100,000, then you value that person's contribution to the organization at $100,000. But if this person now improved their skill by 10%, and that's what we see on average, that in a year's time, people improve on average about 10%. So now we can put a dollar value to this improvement. So if your manager, if you're still paying them $100,000, but now they improved by 10%, the dollar value of that improvement is $10,000. And let's say that we have 50 managers in this leadership development program using the app. So that equals to $500,000. And then we can put a basic ROI calculation together. So we take $500,000 minus, let's say, $30,000 that we spent on this program and technology, divided by $30,000, and that gives us an ROI of 1,566%, which is absolutely excellent. So in this very quick recorded version of the webinar, I wanted to share with you a new approach for how you can make leadership development more personalized to every leader in your organization. And you can achieve that through a combination of virtual assessment centers and applications like the Leader Habit app. If you are interested in the Pinsight solution, do not hesitate to request a demo at pinsight.com. My name is Martin Lanik, and I hope that you enjoyed this webinar. Thank you. Bye-bye.